Hello, and thank you for joining the webinar, How Chili's Serves Up Unique Social Media Content by Audience and Channel. I'm Kim Sirico, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. Please feel free to enter your questions in the Q&A widget at the bottom of your screen. We'll be happy to answer your questions at the end of the webinar. We will be emailing a link of the recording and a PDF of the slide deck from this webinar to you later on today. Please feel free to join us on social media by using hashtag NetBaseWebinar. I'd like to go ahead and introduce our presenters today. We have Chris Ebler, with Director of Social Media and Community Engagement at Chili's Grill & Bar. The past 2 years, Chris has led a reinvention of social media for the Chili's Grill & Bar brand, infusing a long-lost sense of humor, authenticity, and brand voice into their national platform and spearheading a strategy to foster brand love through engagement and community. During his 12-year tenure, Chris has been the guiding force behind the design and development of experiences that connect Chili's heads to deeper meaning behind why we work. He leads a passionate team of believers who craft ways to emotionally connect with guests and team members in the digital landscape. We also have Mike Baglietto, who is the Global Head of Product Marketing here at NetBase. Mike has 15-plus years experiencing developing marketing strategies, campaigns, and content for addressing the needs of targeted audiences. His experience spans from product management and product marketing to demand generation and social media. I'd like to hand it over to Mike. Mike, go ahead.
Great, Kim, and thanks everyone for joining us. We've got a great presentation today. We met Chris. Chris has been working with us for a couple years and how they're using social media analytics to inform their strategy in terms of reaching out to their customers is just awesome. And I think you're really going to like what Chris has to say, and you can probably take away some of these points and apply them to your business as well. I'd like to kick off this presentation to really focus on why customer listening is really important to understanding what your consumers are saying and how you can apply that to your business. And then we'll turn it over to Chris to let him explain how Chili's is using this to drive their strategy as well. So customer experience analytics, we believe, really informs every aspect of your business. And when we talk about customer experience analytics, we really talk about all sources of consumer feedback: social media, internal data, traditional techniques of surveys, star ratings, net promoter scores, et cetera. And once you get all this information into a platform like NetBase, you can actually start to analyze it and you start to really draw some critical insights to help move your business forward. Customer listening is more important today now than ever, simply because customers not only have a lot to say, they're saying it, and they're saying it across a variety of channels. They're sharing their experiences, not just on Twitter with text, but they're also using a lot of imagery, a lot of experiential data on channels like Facebook and Instagram. And so you really need to be listening and seeing and watching not only what their experience is with your brand, but with your competitors as well. The challenge with this, of course, is that the data is extremely disintegrated. It is often text-based, but there's a lot of image analytics as well, or a lot of image sharing as well. And the data is really complex, and it's hard to really get your arms around, what customers are saying. So you need a platform that can help you untangle this web of content and help you understand what's going viral, what are my consumers really saying and sharing, and how do we apply this to our business. So NetBase uses a next-generation AI platform. It's our own platform. It's our own technology. And what we do is we apply a variety of next-generation AI techniques to untangle that matrix of consumer feedback. And again, we talked about the different sources we have. Social media is a huge component of that. But we can also import other sources of data that you may have within your organization. And we apply a variety of expert systems, machine learning, and deep learning techniques to pull out different aspects of those consumer shares and those consumer posts, including demographics, language analytics, and image analytics to help you understand consumer sentiment drivers, emotions, passions, behaviors, et cetera. And this allows us to actually get more insight from each post that your consumer is sharing. So you can see within a single post, you can actually see there's a lot of different things that you can cull from this one interaction with your brand, and you can see that we've got emotions, behaviors, attributes, people terms, hashtags, as well as information about the audience that's sharing that. And this is really important when you start looking at this as an aggregate, because social media is the largest user group, focus group, if you will, in the world. And so you can get real-time feedback right away that's very insightful to help you move your brand forward. And we're seeing organizations use this information to drive all aspects of their business. We tend to think of social media analytics as something that helps our digital marketing strategy, which is true. Most people use that right away. They also use it for their brand strategy. They want to understand how they're performing within their category, but it can also affect or impact your customer communications, your PR strategy in the event of a crisis. Maybe you're making a product announcement. It can impact your customer care. I know T-Mobile is huge on their social care programs, and they use social listening extensively to connect with those consumers, as well as R&D and product innovation, hearing what customers are saying and ways in which they're using your products or services that either you haven't thought of before or different ways that they're applying it to their life that may spur new ideas for innovation. So with that, these are just sample of the ways that customers are using social analytics to drive their business. Here's a quick sample of our customers that are using it today. You're probably familiar with many of these brands, as you are with the Chili's brand. So with that, I'd like to just, before I hand it over to Chris, let you know we're going to be in a lot of cities here in the next couple months, and if you love the presentation you hear today, this is the kind of content we present at our meetings here on the road. We've got 2 full-day events in New York and Chicago here in early April, as well as we have a road show breakfast events in the cities below, Toronto, Boston, D.C., Minneapolis, et cetera. If you want more information on these upcoming events and you'd like to see content like what we're presenting today, please join us at one of these cities. I think you'll really get a lot of value from this, and you can hear our customers, and you can network with other net-based customers to see what strategies they're using that you can apply to the work that you're doing with your brands and your agencies. So with that, I'm really excited to introduce Chris with Chili's. Chris, why don't you take us through how you guys are using social analytics today to connect with your audiences?
Awesome. I will do just that. Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Kim. It's a pleasure to be with everybody today. It was a little bit of a nerve-wracking moment because a major storm blew through Dallas early this morning and knocked out power to our building. So I was really aspirationally thinking I might be the first guest ever to have a webinar happening in the pitch black. But power's back on. Everything's fine. Hope everyone is safe and sound where you are. I know that the weather has been crazy today with storms in the Rockies and all kinds of stuff. But I wanted to really start in possibly a weird place. A weird place in the sense that I think one of the things I'll talk about today and what we're certainly seeing here at Chili's is this idea that social media and marketing just in general is becoming this kind of dig into cultural anthropology. It's how people are living their lives, what they're finding interesting, what insights you can learn about what people are talking about and paying attention to. And I think it's so ironic what we're starting to see. For example, the idea that the 90s have suddenly come back in a giant way. Rolling Stone has been writing about how the 90s have become a new obsession for people. Salt and Peppa suddenly opened a residency in Las Vegas that was a flash in the pan. It has since closed, but it's pretty remarkable to see shows are coming back onto TV. Will and Grace is back. Roseanne is back. For gosh sakes, the Backstreet Boys are back. They have a brand new album, and even fanny packs are back. So you have to ask yourself, what is going on? What is really driving that kind of interest for people? And for me personally, It's quite fascinating to see the resurgence of a company that I used to work for suddenly back in mainstream media in a very weird way, where only one location is open today. And even Captain Marvel crash landed in the new Captain Marvel movie into a Blockbuster as they go back in time to the 90s. Target even has actually created a Make It a Blockbuster Night t-shirt. I was on the team that helped create that national campaign. So it's kind of ironic that all of this is happening, and you have to ask yourself, why is that relevant? And here's why I think that's relevant. Really, what's so fascinating to watch in this space is how brands like your own have suddenly taken on meaning that is far beyond the product and service that we are offering in today's world. We talk about this brand relevance curve a lot. We actually started our strategy or overhauled our social media strategy at Chili's a couple of years ago in tandem with an overhaul in our marketing strategy to really focus on what do we want to be known for. Have we done a good job of connecting with our guests to define what we're all about? And do we really represent the customer base that we have? And ultimately, I think we all want to be working for a brand that when something goes wrong, you have people that actually forgive and or possibly even defend you in the public arena because they know what you stand for, they know what your values are, and they somehow or another kind of personally identify with your company or your brand. So for us, that really started with an overhaul a couple of years ago. I've been with Chili's for a long time and with Brinker, but for specifically the marketing side of things and this desire to kind of look at social and how we were leveraging it, there were three big areas of opportunity for us, the first of which was truly engaging with the audience that was already there. Today is actually Chili's birthday. We're 44 years old. We've been doing this for quite a while. And what we found was people were out there talking about us, but we weren't doing a good job of engaging with them and talking back and having conversations with folks that enjoy the brand to help kind of define who we are and what we care about. We shifted our focus to invest much more in telling our story. Everybody's heard that phrase, content is king. And while that's only a piece of the strategy, it all kind of works together. We have certainly found that investing in telling our story is critical to creating that sense of connection with our guests. And then last but not least, I'll talk a little bit here in a while about the need to be nimble in a space that is just truly constantly changing. Literally every day. And does your brand or company fit in terms of what you're talking about? Is there something going on in pop culture or in the media that makes sense for your brand to be there? And how do you turn that around and actually have that conversation with folks and weigh in a way that seems true or real to who you are? A lot of people ask me, has it worked? My answer is an unresounding yes. It has been a real interesting journey for us to show this brand's personality and character, and it's been a dramatic improvement for us in our engagement levels and, frankly, even in share of voice and making sure that we are at the top of the list as it comes to our competitors relative to what people are talking about when it comes to casual dining. And the investment in telling our story has been one that has proven to be giving us a ton of ROI. It's been a diverse journey, and it's really been something that, whether it be on Facebook or on Twitter or on Instagram, we're constantly learning. So I don't want to give the impression today that we have it all figured out and that we are perfect, because Lord knows we are certainly not. But what we are doing is really leveraging NetBase and the tools we have to listen to what people are talking about and understand what is working and what's not. And does it make sense for us to show up in certain pop culture moments or not? For example, why in the world would Chili's create fascinators and cufflinks to celebrate the royal wedding? Well, we did it, and we jumped into that conversation in a unique way where people said, this is just crazy that Chili's is jumping into this conversation. But because we are fans of these stories just as much as anybody is, we're kind of reflecting back what we're seeing and are able to make the brand feel a little bit more personable in a world that is really, really constantly evolving right underneath our feet. I saw a report this week from Shareably that they did their 2018 kind of landscape report about social media. And one of the things they said is that, yes, Instagram has taken off and people are sharing tons more content on Instagram and Twitter, but Facebook has certainly seen its share of declines. And more importantly, the thing that I really kind of latched onto was that they're basically saying that roughly about 3.5% decline in the amount of engagement that guests or customers are having with brands. And it raises the question, why would one of our guests or customers want to engage with a brand these days? And you have to kind of really understand what people are going through, and that if it's a gender reveal party, if it's a vacation, if it's a bachelorette party, suddenly from a marketing standpoint, you're kind of showing up in their world on social media with some sort of, intent that you have behind maybe paid media or organic posts. And I think it's really kind of interesting to ask ourselves as marketers, why would we show up? And does anybody really care if we're showing up? And I don't mean that to sound super bleak, but I think we do have to kind of take ownership and understand that it's very obvious now that we're being marketed to. I think everyone has kind of certainly figured out that social media is a great avenue to reach your guests and customers. And the days of it being kind of, I don't know, just a normal way of doing business have arrived. And as our own consumers, as we are consumers of other brands, like, we get it. We know that we're going to get served ads. There's no kind of mystery or surprise to it. And it's become a very commonplace thing. But I think we do have to ask ourselves, if we're going to quote-unquote interrupt somebody's gender reveal or bachelorette party or vacation, why would we do that? And do they want to hear from us? Do they care about what we have to say? And I think this kind of was proven in the trust barometer that Edelman puts out, a PR agency that basically reports on kind of the American landscape and how people feel about who and what they trust out in the public arena. The scary thing, I think, is that now there is a great deal, I think we all kind of can acknowledge, there's a great deal of mistrust, and marketers certainly are in that. Possibly we've done this to ourselves, where we've created a relationship that doesn't seem trustworthy, or that seems like all we're interested in is trying to sell you something. And Edelman particularly called out that in their survey results, it shows that social media was seen as second from the bottom and only marginally more trusted than a used car salesman. So if any of you out there are used car salesmen, I'm not trying to be critical of your world, but it is interesting that folks would have that level of distrust in what we're doing from a social media and marketing perspective. And in addition to that, I think it's really interesting to understand what marketers want to do versus what consumers actually want on social. And I know you'll get the printout. You'll be able to kind of see this closer up and take a look at the details here. But I think it's really, really fascinating that consumers are basically saying, on the far right column, you can see consumers saying that what they want social for is either discounts or sales, posts that showcase new products or services, or posts that teach them something. And yet, look at what marketers are wanting to do. They believe that really really what we should be investing in is posts that teach something. So there's a little bit of alignment there, posts that tell a story, or posts that inspire. And, you have to ask, are we kind of in accordance or in alignment with what people are asking of us? I think another big thing that really has happened in the social media landscape that is nerve-wracking is that I think the whole industry has become one in which you're trying to game the system. You're trying to hack this algorithm or figure out how can I get attention for what I have to say in a world where we have shorter attention spans than a goldfish and where people are on multiple devices all day long. Like, what's going to get anybody's attention? And is marketing now at a place where we're just simply seen as a nuisance or an inconvenience versus that we're actually serving up something that people are truly interested in? The other big thing, of course, is this issue around privacy. The current landscape is kind of saying, there's just a tremendous amount of confusion, certainly a little bit of hysteria. There are some facts, like there's some facts about how this is going and what social has done. I mean, whether it be these kind of miscellaneous privacy or data breaches, whether it be how people are using data, that's become a very commonplace conversation in homes all around the world, and people realize that now maybe I don't want to really share too much about who I am or where I am or what I'm doing or what products I like. So that certainly begs the question, again, as marketers in this current landscape, how can we do stuff that actually seems relevant to our guests and our consumers? And one of the final ones I'll mention in terms of this current landscape is this really interesting, again, kind of cultural anthropology moment where the impact that we've seen of people being bullied or people being, their self-esteem being eroded has turned into kind of a call to arms for people to really celebrate the unique individuality, to not fall into some sort of, quote-unquote, kind of demographic or classification. People have this kind of natural ambivalence or resistance to being lumped into a group of people because all of us are saying, well, I may have certain kind of criteria of my age or where I live or whatever, but I don't necessarily want to be like the next door neighbor. I want to be independent. I want to have unique viewpoints. I want to put my voice out there. And as Mike mentioned earlier in the conversation, we have seen what that has done to social media. There is this tremendous escalation of conversations happening and people voicing their opinion, and it certainly creates a sometimes hostile but sometimes really rewarding environment to be involved in social media. So I think these are the questions that we need to start asking ourselves as marketers, and I think these are really what our guests are asking. Do you get me? Do you see me? And do you really understand my life? Do you understand what is important to me or what I value? And if and when you make that alignment with what they're looking for and with what their lifestyle is like, and you as a brand are kind of serving that to them, whether it be paid or organic, that's where you get the magic that starts to happen. And for us, it's been a journey these past couple of years, and we've seen the impact of when that works and, frankly, when it doesn't. So I'll say again, we haven't perfected this by any stretch of the imagination, but we are learning as we go, and that's one of the ways that NetBase continues to be an advantage to us. As an example, this is a piece of content that we did last year that was about a funny little way to kind of use one of the most famous catchphrases associated with the brand in a culturally kind of interesting way. We were paying attention to the fact that especially if you take a look at what people are starting to be intrigued by, is this kind of back to basics, or this kind of nostalgia for nesting and for being at home, for kind of getting rid of some of the digital distractions. You see people detoxing and saying, I'm going off social media, or I'm putting my phone away for a week or whatever. I'm going on vacation and I'm not going to be around. And there is this kind of interesting hearkening back, and I think that's really what you see coming out of this resurgence of stuff from the 90s, is people want to feel a little bit more connected, and certainly in a very kind of distracting landscape, they want something that feels a little bit more homey. So we gave this a shot. Believe it or not, we actually had some people cross-stitch the "Hi, welcome to Chili's" phrase, and we put it out just as a little bit of an ironic kind of nod or wink to what we care about in one of our kind of big cultural phrases. On the far left, you see how it did on Instagram. In the middle, you see how it did on Twitter, and then on the far right, you see, it just did not drive engagement on Facebook. And that's not probably a big alarming surprise to any of you out there today. The idea of a channel-specific strategy is nothing new, and I'm not trying to tell you that it's new. I'm just trying to tell you that from a Chili's story standpoint, it really helped us understand that there are things that are working for us in certain channels, and then there are things that are just simply not resonating with people. So the big question, all right, well, why did that happen? Why is it that did not do as well, given what we know about the current landscape and all the things I've talked about up until this point? So the big question then was, all right, where to from here? Like, what can we learn from this? How can we benefit from the vast amount of information that we have at our disposal? So in terms of our audience, just to give you a little bit of data about who they are and how we learn about where people are and what they're interested in and what their values are. Our Facebook audience is mostly concentrated, as you can see there, in the 25 to 44 age range. We definitely skew overwhelmingly female on Facebook. Half of that audience is married, and about 30% of them identifying themselves as single. Interestingly enough for us, we have really started to acknowledge that, again, probably no surprise to anyone, mobile is certainly where it's at, but what we kind of then adopted is, let's take more of a mobile-first approach, especially if we're putting any sort of content out there that is video-based, more kind of portrait video versus landscape video, just based on the way people are consuming information these days on their mobile devices. The interests that we learned as well, so if you kind of cross-pollinate and say, all right, that Facebook audience that is engaging with us, what are they engaging in with others? And this kind of reinforces the slide that I was talking about a little while ago, that people, particularly in this demographic and this group of people that follow us, are really interested in deals and discounts, and you can see that coming through in their favorite Facebook pages. So it became very, very obvious to us that deals or discounts or new opportunities or even educational opportunities like Box Tops for Education, Disney movie rewards, so like family entertainment deals and discounts, was a real identifying feature for our audience. And for us, we've defined that group of people as values-oriented families. And they are our primary audience on Facebook. They really want to know what's in it for me, and they're super family-focused. They want to get the best deal, but they definitely still want to be entertained. And so what you can see there is the most engaging posts that we put out for 2018. In particular, the one in the middle was an interpretation of the zodiac signs and associated menu items that people would enjoy based off of whether they were an Aquarius, a Pisces, an Aries. That did tremendously well because it just felt like that was is resonating with our target audience in terms of tagging their friends and family and kind of having a conversation around either this is me or this isn't me. And then on the far right, you can see when we launched a refreshed My Chili's Rewards program with free chips and salsa at every visit, that resonated for them. That really meant a lot to them. On Twitter, it's a little bit different for us. So heavily in the 18 to 34 age range, and kind of this new generation of folks that are coming up that within the next 5 to 10 years are going to have more investment to be made, more disposable income to be able to kind of make their choice of whether they think Chili's is kind of matching their values and kind of who they are in terms of their identity. On Twitter, humor is by far the number one driving factor for Chili's. This is where we have fun. It is pretty equally matched between females and males, but it skews a little bit younger, and as a result, because of that humor being so critical, the humor is a little bit more ironic. It's definitely still in the Chili's voice and aligns to what we're trying to convey in terms of who we are, but it's obviously different than what we're posting on Facebook. And NetBase has really allowed us to kind of dig into that audience and really find some very interesting things. For example, the areas where we over-index. We over-index with pets, anime, arts and crafts, gaming, and beauty with our audience on Twitter, which is really quite interesting. And we see all the time posts like what you see on the far right, which is people that are talking about anime and talking about characters. This is a sketch that a guy did and is associating anime with Chili's, and we see it all the time. So, the big question, people see this and they go, so what does that mean? Like, what do you do with that? And what I would say is we learn from that. We don't necessarily immediately run out and say, all right, this weekend we're posting something about anime and Chili's, because we don't want to force the conversation either. But we do want to find what does that mean to us? What does that mean about this audience? And what does that tell us about what they're interested in and their sense of humor or their sense of personality? And when and if it's appropriate, we might have that conversation with folks. But it's a real big learning opportunity for us to understand these interests of our audience. And then when you get into the Instagram audience, again, younger, 18 to 34, but the highest concentration of fans in the 25 to 34 age range, and it skews a little bit more female, unlike Twitter, but definitely like Facebook. Same sort of thing here. Is interesting to look at where we over-index in terms of what people say in their bio and how we kind of assess that. We see a lot of people talking about being a student on Instagram, having some sort of association with the creative arts, and you can see how we're able to kind of put some visuals around what that tells us and what that means in terms of what people are interested in, and that directly impacts what we then go produce. As an example, you can see here, what we have definitely seen is that, food and drink on Instagram is a natural tie-in. People talk about the hashtag food porn or hashtag on the table all the time. It's still one of the most active hashtags out there, and one of the most interesting ways to kind of reflect, what people are thinking about. I think it's no surprise that you still see people Instagramming their meal before they actually eat it, and we've really leaned into that. It's interesting to look at what people put in their bios as well, because we over-index obviously with food and drink, which probably isn't a surprise to you. However, travel does show up and over-indexes a little bit with our audience, which is kind of interesting, because what that tells us is they're probably more of what we would call like an experience seeker. They're out there wanting to kind of experience the world and see the world around them and have that reflected in the brands and friends and family that they follow and how they engage on that channel. So what that did for us was help us kind of internally segment or group the content categories that we go play with. This is very specific to us based off of what we've learned through analyzing those audiences and using our tools like NetBase. Facebook, in summary, is basically, what are our new offerings or deals? Is there a way that we can make that audience laugh and basically say, oh, they get me, or they get what's funny, or what they're sharing is, it feels like me, it feels like it aligns to me. And certainly Facebook is really about families for us. On Twitter, it's all about really being funny and having a good time, not taking ourselves too seriously, certainly paying attention to what's going on in the public space and what people are talking about, sometimes jumping into those conversations, sometimes not, and finding those little kind of cultural nuggets that's happening where, brands can play now. They've got a little bit more liberty to show their personality and character and kind of have a voice that's unique. So for us, it's really that third category of we need to know ourselves better first to be able to then go serve up things that are interesting to our fans and followers. And then on Instagram, like I said, it's food and drink. It's certainly about indulgence, beautiful and tidy shots of food and what we offer, kind of creating that craveability. But also it's really about entertaining. One of the most successful posts we had on Instagram last year was, believe it or not, a word search, and people just had a blast with it. So that really frames up kind of what we do day in and day out in terms of where we're going to be and what we're going to be talking about. But in this kind of cultural norm that I talked about a little while ago, where everything is so fast-paced and you're trying to get any sort of focus or attention on what you're caring about and what you value, one of the things we've done with our social agency is create what we refer to as a newsroom, and we leverage Pinterest for this. This is a closed group of us that we're able to kind of look at, again, in that kind of cultural anthropology sort of way, we're able to look at what are people talking about, what are they sharing, what are their interests, and sometimes some of those really make perfect alignment with our audiences. Sometimes they don't, and so we stay away from them. We have a conversation looking at what is kind of the hot topic culturally, what are people talking about, what is kind of new and relevant. Because as I said, and where I started at the beginning of this presentation, my belief is that really relevance is now the single hottest topic that we can be talking about. And if we're going to interrupt people in living their daily lives with content from us, why would they care? And so we have to keep kind of asking ourselves, how do we stay relevant? How do we stay current with what people are talking about? And these are just a couple of examples of what that looks like in terms of real practice. And the last thing I'll say relative to how we leverage that information is just that we've come to terms with the fact that selling products and services might not be the best match, at least for us, on social media. We know that one of the core principles of marketing is to get your product and service out there. And yet we really fundamentally believe that there are systems and tools in place to kind of drive sales and traffic, and that in terms of kind of brand expression and who we are as a company, social is much more of a place where we can create real connections with people. And if we do our jobs right and leverage the tools that are at our disposal, we can be more informed about what people care about, what they find funny, where they feel like we're a good match. And so for us, it really is much more of a conversation about brand over time rather than immediate sales overnight. So these are just some examples of how we've seen that play out in 2018 and where we continue to play. A good example is, believe it or not, Chili's had a whole series of outfit of the day, just an expression of kind of who we are, where you see our food kind of integrated into these funny scenes where we're kind of displaying all that you need to go enjoy summer at the beach or poolside with chips and salsa. And our fans and followers absolutely react to stuff like that in a super positive way, which drives our brand affinity. So I'll conclude by kind of bringing it full circle and showing you a couple of examples of paid media that we've been, kind of learning from and testing based off of this idea of trying to do a better job of understanding who our target audience is and what they care about and being relevant in a way that we show up. What I'll show you are two separate examples, both of which leverage this idea that if you're going to be in somebody's feed and your message is to kind of foster some sense of connection or some sense of identity for your brand in that context of being in social media, you really want to look like what they see every day. And so we have a fantastic value offer that has been very successful for us to that kind of we communicate quite a bit about, which is 3 for $10. And we wanted to convey, like, what are some of the values or the reasons why people leverage this 3 for $10 promotion and deal. And it really was to convey that with a drink, an appetizer, and a full entree, you can get an incredible amount of food at Chili's for $10, and great food. It's not like you get half portions or anything like that, but we wanted to show it in a way that people would think about, oh, that's my life. That's exactly what's going on with me. And so I'll click through here and show you a couple examples of that. These are just quick 10 to 12 second paid ads that we created using these principles. Here's the first.
So here's what I've done in the way of meal planning. Nothing. Yep.
So super fast, super simple, but really kind of leaning into this awareness that consumers now are talking a whole lot about feeling like they're not doing a very good job of parenting because they're not meal planning. I jokingly refer to folks around the office that meal plan as very strange creatures that I would never understand because I just simply don't get how to do that. I'm just not great at it. Or when you head to the grocery store and feel a little bit overwhelmed with the options available to you.
See, this is what I'm talking about. What kind of list is that?
What is bulk lettuce? I'm making a hamburger.
They got onion, buns.
They got Kobe Jack, garlic herb jack.
How many jacks? She adding more choices right now as we speak.
So the whole point with both of those is leverage the audience information that really show up in a relevant way that is fitting for your target audience, that really looks like them. And hopefully what you can see there is those don't necessarily capture all the qualities of what you would normally expect a paid ad to be, and yet we found them to be really on point with who we are, very effective in terms of driving conversation, and a lot of people basically saying, oh my God, that's just like me. I go through that all the time. So I will end with wishing you all a great Wednesday. Thank you for the opportunity to the NetBase team, and thank you all for joining us today. It is our birthday, and we have an amazing opportunity for you to go celebrate. So if it's our birthday, that means you get to come in and actually enjoy a great deal on a margarita. So get out there, go to your local Chili's. Thanks for your time today. Really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you.
This is fantastic content, and I know Chris is happy to answer some questions. So we do have a Q&A widget in the webinar mode that you can ask some questions. I know we have a couple coming in already. So with that, I want to just give you guys some resources that are available. We do have some resources that you can take a look at on our website. We've got resources around different industries, travel, hospitality, retail, food and beverage, media and entertainment. And we have not only love lists, things that rankings that the customers are talking about their favorite brands in those categories, but best practices around things like campaign strategy, managing crises, digital marketing, things like that. So check out our resources pages. There's a lot of great content. You can sort it by industry and use case, so that should help you out, give you some direction on some of the programs and the activities you guys are doing. I know we've got a couple questions queued up here. Chris, I've got one question for you. There are a lot of folks who, when they start this journey and really starting to understand the consumers from their social analytics perspective, where would you recommend our audience first start in terms of really getting their hands around or their head around, what consumers are thinking and feeling? What recommendations would you give our audience for that?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to where we started early in the conversation, particularly around engagement. I am a firm believer that really one of the challenges I think for any brand is to show up in conversation in an authentic way, and that was really a challenge for us. So actually, even before we really started, frankly, investing in NetBase and diving into these kind of tool sets that give us so much information, we frankly just started with talking to people. We wanted to understand kind of where were these conversations happening, what was the tone of voice around them, how were we showing up, what did people believe about us, purely just by starting to engage with them. That was really kind of year one of a 3-year strategy. We're now kind of in the midst of year 2, and starting with that engagement, we were able to understand certain stuff is resonating with people on Twitter, and we found a tremendous opportunity through our internal team to engage with them and have those conversations. And then we started noticing in a real funny way, we started noticing people saying, I don't care what you say, I'm just going to admit it, I love Chili's. There's this funny thing happening, and when you talk about cultural anthropology, and anybody that's listening that's in the restaurant business, there's this really, really interesting thing happening where people don't want to be associated with a big entity. They don't want to be associated with big companies. It's looked at as some sort of negative. Chili's is a big casual dining brand. And in that arena, you look like, you're showing up in a way that isn't authentic and that people don't really trust, that you're making the food in-house or that you're serving great meals. Do we have situations where we drop the ball? Unequivocally, yes. However, it's really interesting to be kind of a bigger restaurant brand in this world where people don't really like the idea of bigger companies. So we learned a lot from that. We started engaging in conversations that people frankly said, oh my God, y'all are nuts. You're kind of crazy. We definitely amped up the tone of voice. We definitely had more fun with it and started to see that in that year 2, we then had to be a little bit more, a little bit more scientist about it and really understand, because we can dive into those sentiment numbers and understand, what is it that we're doing that's working and what is it that just isn't working for people, or where do they find the most complaints associated with the Chili's brand. That information then becomes very, very valuable to our internal operations team, certainly becomes very valuable to our team members, our Chili heads all around the world, because they leverage social media to kind of understand what are people saying about this company that I work for. So hopefully that answers the question. We really truly started with just by diving into conversations first and then NetBase second.
Fantastic. Kim, are there some questions from our audience?
Yes, we do. We do have a question. Just a quick reminder, there is a widget at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to enter your questions to the Q&A widget. We have a question to, what is Chili's approach to local? Do you have an organic presence at the local level, or do you keep it brand level only?
That is a great question. So I'll be honest with you, local, the magic 8 ball. It's really been challenging to get that kind of brand voice down to the local level. What I can tell you is we do have more of a parent-child relationship. It is mostly the national voice that is then getting down to the local level through obviously our Facebook channels. But what we have found most valuable about the local presence and where we are actively listening is when it comes to social care. So our approach to local is we pay attention to what people are saying about our local restaurants. We actively actually have 2 separate groups that are listening to those conversations. It's being used to then fuel and report out to our restaurants what guests are saying about their local restaurant. There's a direct line of sight, a insights group that we have, a data science group that we have here at Chili's that then listens to all of that, creates the reports, blasts it back out to the restaurants, so that while it may not be in real time, it's essentially the next day that a general manager or management team can look to see what were people saying about the experience they had with our restaurant yesterday. It also has a ton to do with how people are using those reviews and ratings to score our restaurants. I think all of us know that certainly impacts our search engine optimization and how we're showing up. So that's been an active process for us the past couple of years. What I will tell you, at least in terms of engagement at a local level, is what we have found is that some of our general managers and managing partners out in the restaurant, they're brave enough to kind of put themselves out there as the general manager of this location, meaning they sometimes respond back to guests that are commenting about an experience that they had, and they flat out say, come see me tomorrow. Here's my phone number. I'll be in the restaurant. I want to resolve this for you and take care of you, because that's not the experience we want you to have. And so is there a national presence at the local level? Somewhat, as it relates to listening and reporting, but not content creation.
Great. Thanks, Chris. So this question refers to, I think, basically, how do you decide what kind of content do you feel that will perform best on various platforms? Is there a process that you guys go through when you're looking at the various types of content that you want to utilize? And, what's your selection process on, what platforms do you use for the various content pieces that you have?
Yeah, so it's kind of twofold. First of which is we know that there are certain, I kind of mentioned that, marketers are kind of in this pickle now of really wanting to authentically connect with the folks that are engaged with their brand, and yet it is kind of obvious that part of the function is to tell people what's new or what deals or discounts are going on. I'll be honest, a couple years ago when I started leading this team, I was incredibly reticent to the idea of telling people, here's what's new at your local Chili's, because it just felt like, that used car salesman vibe that I was talking about. It felt like we were shilling or selling too much. What we have found, however, again, leveraging these tools is that, frankly, that is what people want, and you do have to kind of come to terms with the fact that that part of your job is to help convey the national message of what is available, maybe new products. We've had a tremendous opportunity to tell people about our craftsmanship as it relates to margaritas. So every month we have a margarita of the month, and those margarita fans have become kind of a little community within our community, because they're always asking us, okay, it's the first of the month, what's next? And they create little conversations about our margaritas of the month. So So that is kind of, there's this national bucket of stuff that we're looking at that is supporting the national message, making sure we do get kind of deals and offers and promotional things out there, but doing it in a way that's reflective of who we are and what we care about. There's a whole side of it, though, that is also more real-time, and what I was talking about with the newsroom. That stuff is purely driven by what are our consumers talking about, what are they intrigued by, what are they interested in, what are they finding funny, what are they finding ironic, and if and when it makes sense for Chili's to show up in those places, we'll go produce it. And so we have a great agency partner that we work with that has in-house creative talent that, frankly, is able to turn stuff for us in as short as maybe 48 hours and get it out there in a real fast and timely fashion, just to be a part of the conversation if we feel it fits. So it's a mix of both. Not sure if that fully answers the question, but I think hopefully that would give you a little bit of insight into how we do it.
Great. Thanks so much, Chris. So this is kind of answering one person's question. They're asking about how do you handle crisis situations, both along the lines of, like you're mentioning, customer care and how the local, your local restaurants will address people's concerns in the local aspect. But I think maybe Chris and Mike can probably also discuss, how is social analytics as well as how does Chili's address any kind of crisis situations when they come up?
Yeah, this one, we could spend a whole other hour talking about this one because it's significant, and it's become a very active internal partnership with our communications and public relations team. We are joined at the hip when those issues surface. We have had our fair share. There's a lot of stuff that we would tell you we're not proud of, that specific situations have happened in our restaurants that simply do not reflect who we are or our values or what we care about. What we have done is invest time in analyzing what creates this kind of tipping point to push something over the edge into crisis territory. I will tell you every day, we are working diligently to try and create a great experience for people. However, every day, based on the scale and the size of this organization, there's going to be situations that we're not proud of, or where a team member has said something inappropriate or done something that just doesn't seem service-oriented or hospitality-focused. And so we do have people telling us every day, you let us down at this location or that location. We have an amazing guest engagement team. We hand those off to them. We let them make a personal connection then with the guest and reach out to them. We, in those moments, kind of act as an intermediary to make sure that our social guest is connected with our guest engagement team, and they work super, super hard to ensure that people understand they are special and valuable to us. However, we watch certain things. We've got a whole kind of risk assessment grid that we've worked on with our public relations team to kind of identify what are the things that create the tipping point. A lot of times it has to do with a guest that filmed something in a restaurant. As an example, if there's a social post that has a video attached to it that has a ton of negative sentiment, we kind of see that as a greater risk because it's more likely that the video part of it will be more emotional to folks watching and could become something that gets shared quite extensively. It also has a lot to do with kind of the current cultural landscape and what the hot button issues that people are talking about. So we factor that in as well. If it is a conversation, as an example, about harassment or racism or discrimination, those are vitriolic conversations in this country, and certainly we have our fair share of them at Chili's, and we go super, super fast to kind of ensure that that does not turn into a crisis. But in the cases where it starts to look like it's going in that direction, there's a whole team of people that kind of we come together to talk about, what happened, what do we know, do we have folks on the ground that can help us investigate this, and really kind of we dig in as if it's an investigation into something that happened negatively at one of our restaurants. So crisis is, like I said, a whole nother conversation, but that's kind of the quick snippet of how we manage those.
Yeah, I think let me jump on this really. Yeah, Kim, let me jump on this topic really quickly. You know, one of the key elements to get your hands around or get your head around a crisis really fast is to have a system that will actually alert you in real time when these moments occur, right? And so with a platform like NetBase, we can alert you proactively given a sudden change of mention volume or a sudden change in sentiment. So you may not be as quick to read through those comments as our platform is. So we'll actually pick that up really quickly if you have your alert set up and send that to you, which is the first step. I think Chris reiterated a really important point is you need to have an incident response plan and strategy articulated, and you really need to think about it before the incident happens instead of after the incident happens, because with social things can go sideways really quickly and you don't want to make the situation worse. So I appreciate Chris actually talking about sort of the process they go through with their grid and other strategies to help inform the organization as to what's happening, measure it, and then have an incident response plan before those things happen, because that's really critical. It'll save you a lot of time and a lot of aggravation doing some of that work up front. So if you have specific, types of incidents that could happen in this particular instance, our audience member asked about foodborne illnesses. Well, that's one for this particular industry, but I'm sure every industry has their own incidents like product recalls and things like that. So think through that in advance and then align your listening strategy accordingly to feed that incident strategy.
Great. Thanks so much. And we are out of time for today's webinar. So thank you again, everyone, for attending today's webinar, How Chili's Serves Up Unique Social Media Content by Audience and Channel, brought to you by NetBase. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact NetBase at info@netbase.com. Thank you again, and have a nice day.